Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today's painting is a simple bokeh piece. I like to call this a minimalist highway or minimalist bokeh piece. I wanted something simple, nothing too complex or nothing fancy, and just kind of let the little bokeh speak for itself. Sometimes when it's a little less complicated, I think it adds a lot more mystery to the overall piece. So I first start by painting a very thin layer of portrait tone on the background. It's kind of become a habit, but I also feel that it makes the canvas, a blank canvas, less intimidating. And then I do a simple sketch over it with pencil. Then I'm gonna fill the blank spaces with a thin layer of paint. First I'm gonna start with the sky. On that darker strip on top, I'm using a bit of olive green mixed with phthalo blue and turquoise. And below I'm using phthalo blue mixed with turquoise, and in the middle I'm using just turquoise mixed with a bit of ivory white and pale grey. Since this is just the first layer, so don't worry too much about it, we're gonna fill up the rest of the painting first. I'm using deep grey for these poles and a bit of cold grey for this first signboard here. And for the third signboard, for the second and fourth signboard, I'm going to use phthalo blue mixed with mighty green. Now below here, I'm just making a few rough road markings with the paintbrush, but this is just not the final piece. It's kind of to see if it would go with the painting. And I'm going to be painting Payne's Grey over it. I'm actually not great at drawing either, so on the right you can see just a subtle shape of a car because we're on a highway. I think the best part about out of focus paintings is that it doesn't have to be too accurate, but a rough shape will do because your mind will be able to process that familiar shape. And for this big blank space in the middle, I've decided to just paint it black. I know that a lot of experts say that you should never use black in the painting, but I think in some cases it's actually fine because it adds a layer of drama to the piece. Now that I've kind of filled up all the blank spaces in the painting and I have a rough idea of how it will look, then I go in with the second layer. And this time we're going to be painting properly. The colors are the same, it's just that I'm applying a much more generous amount of paint so that it's opaque. For the blank spaces, I use a flat white brush, which is easier to blend, and when I get closer to the details, I use a smaller brush. So just a refresher, on top I'm using phthalo blue mixed with a little bit of olive green and turquoise. And in the middle, like over here, I'm using turquoise mixed with a bit of pale grey and ivory white. And below would be phthalo blue and turquoise combined, and it'll create a nice gradient for the sky. Once I've kind of outlined the bottom of the signboards, I'm just switching back to a bigger brush. It's okay if you kind of overshoot the part where you're supposed to paint. For example, if the brush overlaps to the black part of it, because we can paint over that later. So you just add a bit of water and continue this back and forth motion and get the colors all nicely blended. There are times if you can't get the blending right on the first try, instead of forcing it by adding more and more paint continuously, just let the paint dry and then paint over it a second time. Once you're done with the sky, then we're going to fill in this space with moss black. This part is quite easy, no blending needed, it's just pretty much one solid color painting. I've been trying to keep this piece as minimal as possible, which sometimes I find it can be a bit hard to do as well. And at the bottom here, I'm just going to paint over all the road markings, which I will add back again later, in Payne's Grey. Next, we're going to be working on the signboards. I didn't want it to be flat with just one color, so I outlined it with deep grey, and in the middle I paint it with pale grey. So for the green ones, I mixed Talo blue with Metis green on the outside, and then in the middle I mixed a bit of mid green with it. So there's just a little bit of kind of like a little bit of contrast or glow in the middle, and repeat for the other two signboards. If you zoom into it closely, you can still see a little bit of white spaces, but that's okay because we're going to do a bit of touch up and proceed to the next step later, which I will elaborate. That's kind of like the most important part of a bokeh piece. I'm gonna paint another two more smaller signboards here in Talo blue and deep grey. Now we're gonna work on the car, which was personally the hardest part for me. Originally I had windows and everything planned, but at the end of the day I thought, what the heck, since it's out of focus, it's supposed to be blur, I just painted it in Payne's grey and deep grey, so it's just kind of in the background. Now for the third part of this painting is also my favorite part, but a very important aspect of painting a bokeh piece. This bokeh essentially means out of focus. You need to kind of blur out the landscape in the background before adding all the circles. So this is how you actually blur it. I'm using a size 0 brush for this process, and first you need to find the middle ground, as in, for example, this black part here in the sky. I need to mix both the colors together and paint a line in between first. So that would mean mixing ivory white plus turquoise blue and Mars black, and then paint it in the middle. And then what you need to do is to kind of blend it so it becomes one, as if it's a gradient instead of this sharp contrast, from black to blue. Adjust the colors as you go along to match. For example, this part here is darker than the part on top, so I mix Talo blue and Mars black, paint in the middle, and then I blend it. You also need to blend the top part of this middle line that you've just painted, so it becomes a bit more seamless, like I said, as in one gradient. This part requires a couple of times. Sometimes you'll need for, like I said, for the paint to dry, and then you go again at it. But once it's done, you can already see the blurred effect compared to the ones that are unblended. This part can be a little bit tricky because you have to make sure that you get the shade that matches the color that you've painted before. And especially if you're using acrylic paints, because the paint dries very fast and you have to mix it all over again to get the exact shade. But if you're using oil paints, then it works just fine. This technique applies as well, because you can just reuse it again. So like over here, I had to mix Metis green with turquoise and pale grey, and then I blend it all again so you get that blurred line effect. When working with sharp corners, for example these signboards, or even building blocks or anything with sharp edges, make sure you round the edges, the corners of it, so it has that blurry effect, because nothing sharp looks blur. When working with signboards, I think you can have a bit of fun with it. So it doesn't have to be accurate, like I said. I think you can always add a bit of twist to your painting. So for this one, because it's a diptych painting, I wanted a little bit of contrast. So for me, I've put turn left to dystopia and turn right to utopia. Okay, for writings, I don't actually have the best handwriting. Sometimes I feel like my handwriting ruins it. But to blur writings, I think it's a bit difficult. But what you can do is, instead of making it sharp, as in like full solid written words, add a little bit of gray over it, or the color behind it. For example, the gray signboards, I add a little bit of gray on top of the wordings, and for the green signboards, I add a thin layer of green over it. So now you can make out the wordings, but it's not exactly glaring to the eyes. At the end, I've decided to proceed with the road markings, although I'm not sure if these are recognized. But anyway, I thought it will be a bit too plain below. White will be too stark of a contrast, so I'm using Tallow Blue mixed with a bit of deep grey and also Payne's Grey. And don't forget to blur out the lines as well. Now we're going to be reaching the final part, which will be to add the circles. Because this is a diptych, you can have a bit of fun with it because they can be together as one piece or separate. So I wanted to add one red traffic light on the left one and a green light for the right one. And now for the circles. The size of the circles actually matter because it needs to scale with the painting. Because this is kind of like a more minimalist piece, I wanted the circles to be a little on the smaller side, but not too small, just scaled with the painting. For all these white and yellow circles, you will need to go back again because sometimes the color isn't opaque, especially when you're painting on a darker surface. I'm using crimson, orange, scarlet for the red circles and orange yellow for the orange circles. If you look at my other bokeh paintings, it's a little bit more extensive with all the bokeh circles, so I'm really trying my best to keep this minimal here with as little circles as possible. The car is also starting to take shape when you add the brake lights behind. So for this green one, I'm mixing Metis green, and at the middle, just for that green glow, I'm mixing mid yellow and mid green. Next here would be the lamppost or the street lights lighting up the highway. I'm gonna paint it with orange yellow and mix it with a bit of Naples yellow. For this one, I didn't want it to stand out too much, so it's gonna be slightly transparent, which means I just put a very thin layer of paint for some of the lights. It looks a bit strange right now, but we'll be adding just very thin lines over it to make up the lamppost. Sharp lines are very hard to blur. It's exactly like writings. So once you've painted that thin line, paint over it with the color below it. In this case, it would be turquoise mixed with ivory white and pale gray. So as you can see now, the lines are slightly blurred out. It's there, but not there. For the finishing touches, I want to add glow to the lights, so I'm going to paint a second layer over it. For the red ones, make sure you go around it with crimson, and then in the middle you add orange. Some bokeh circles have the halo effect, which would be this kind of blur line around it. So I just mix it with a bit of titanium white, and in this case it would be orange, and I just kind of outline around it. And then you'll get this halo effect on the bokeh circle. And we are finally about to be done. I cannot stress about how difficult this voiceover was. I think this is my longest one at 13 minutes, but I wanted to make it a little bit more tutorially because my other paintings is so hard to describe because I myself am not sure what I am doing. So I hope that you find this useful. Anyway, I hope you like this painting. This painting is listed on Etsy. The link is in the description. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you like this painting, and I'll see you again in the next video. Goodbye.